Welcome back, agents. In today's briefing, we'll be covering SCP-507, the Reluctant Dimension Hopper. Description: SCP-507 is a Caucasian male with blonde hair and green eyes, sporting no other outstanding characteristics besides being somewhat overweight and speaking with a vague accent of disputable origin. Although it has an already established name due to its unremarkable upbringing, it seems to find entertainment in forcing those it meets to give it a nickname in lieu of divulging this information. Thus, it will now respond to the names Tommy, Steve, Bruto, Guy, Houdini, and Grabnock, the Destroyer. SCP-507 was originally recovered from an asylum when standard surveillance following repeated successful escape attempts brought its abilities to light. All records of this incident were confiscated, and SCP-507 was taken into custody under the pretense of moving to a more secure facility. The original theory was that he possessed some form of teleportation ability, as he would suddenly disappear and eventually reappear in a different location. Subsequent interviews with the subject did verify that his ability could be used in such a manner, but that it was merely a side effect for its main affliction. SCP-507 holds that during its periods of disappearance, it is actually displaced into a random, alternate reality. The landscape generally stays the same, but the inhabitants and climate of the parallel world often do not. He also insists that he has no control over the time and duration of these shifts. This has more or less been confirmed by the subject being known to displace at inconvenient times, such as mid-sentence while sleeping, or even while using on-site public facilities. If SCP-507 moves about in the alternate world, the eventual shift back will then place it at the corresponding area in our reality. Mentally, he shows no large deviations from the psychological profile for a normal person. It has confessed to have always had a great interest in the paranormal and mythological, which has directly led to its eventual permission to interact with relatively harmless SCPs. He especially enjoys meeting with other sentient SCPs, once going so far as to request a small vacation to visit SCP-082. The request was eventually granted after persistent pleading, and the meeting was thankfully uneventful. Special Containment Procedures. SCP-507 is allowed free roam of the facility, obviously barring anything that would breach security or safety protocols. Anytime he leaves his private quarters, he must be accompanied by an agent, mostly at this point, to make sure that it does not shift without the facility's knowledge. SCP-507 should not be physically touched if there have been more than 2 weeks since its last shift. The risks inherent in disobeying this protocol make the action its own punishment, should the issue of disciplinary measures ever come up. When SCP-507 undergoes a shift, faculty will be informed to keep an eye out for his eventual reappearance. He also has a tracking device implanted into him, and a daily signal check should verify whether or not he has returned from his trip. If he reappears in or nearby the facility, SCP-507 will return to its quarters on its own. Otherwise, a retrieval team of 3 plainclothes agents may be sent to provide transportation back. Upon successful return, SCP-507 can be the subject of various physical tests up until 2 weeks after each shift. The rest of the document covers a large number of shifts undergone by SCP-507. Today, we'll be looking at just a handful of these shifts, so feel free to read more for yourself on the wiki. Before we begin, however, it's important to note that SCP-507 has been provided with the following equipment by the Foundation to help aid in his travels. Handgun, loaded with rubber bullets. Only 1 magazine is carried in the gun. Knife with sheath and belt. Tank of air. High-intensity flashlight. 1 week of vegetation ration packs. Waterproofed set of binoculars. Tracking collar. Camera. Keychain-sized Rubik's Cube. Now let's begin. First, he appeared in a white corridor with steel doors lining both walls. Each door had a keypad, a small speaker system, and a clipboard containing forms written in undecipherable characters. As he approached one door to examine said clipboard, The door's attached speaker turned on and began to address him. He was informed that the voice belonged to the person locked behind that specific door, and that he was wrongfully imprisoned, then left to die. The prisoner then pleaded with SCP-507 to release him from his cell. 507, jokingly, replied that he would free the prisoner if he promised not to stab him upon release. There was roughly a 7-second pause before the prisoner asked what stabbing was. After a moment of deliberation, the 507 defined stabbing as putting a hole in someone using a sharp object. Another pause followed. The prisoner eventually affirmed that he could not stab the him, because all of his objects were very blunt. SCP-507 did not open that door or any of the others. Next, he arrived in a forest habitat with no signs of previous or current industrialization. No further anomalies were perceptible until he grew hungry, at which point he discovered that harvesting or eating the plant life would cause them to emit telepathic screams. He abstained from eating for the first day as a result, but became hungry enough on the second day onward to consume the flora in spite of the screams. Testing has shown no biological changes in him from this, but he repeatedly affirms that he felt horrible for doing so. Requests. None specifically, but he adopted a gelatin and pudding-based diet for 2.5 weeks after returning from this shift. Now he manifested in a train-like vehicle. Upon manifesting, he noticed several other individuals seated at various locations along the carriage who did not remark upon his sudden appearance. He noted that the train appeared to be in some kind of black void, with nothing visible out the windows. After 30 minutes, a humanoid creature without facial features spotted him and asked him for his ticket. Upon 507 reporting his lack of tickets, he was searched, and his weapons were confiscated. He was told they would have to leave the train at the next stop, and they would be fined 10 minutes. He began to explore the train but shifted back after walking approximately 3 kilometers and finding no end. Requests, replacement gear. Granted. Here he appeared in the middle of an empty highway and immediately went to the side of the road, beginning to walk towards a city in distance. Upon arrival, he noted that while there were few pedestrians outside, some electronic devices were still active. Most notable of which were a variety of retro television sets throughout sidewalks and roads. Any pedestrians that were outside sat or lay on the ground, watching said television sets. He then sat down in front of one of the sets and saw an ad for reality cleaning laundry detergent. Purported advertisements used a substantial amount of Christian imagery. He shifted back after 53 minutes, unable to recall any other programming that wasn't an advertisement. Retrieval. He appeared in the employee break room, seeming to repeatedly mutter phrases described as being about laundry detergent. He recovered after 5 minutes, although he proceeded to talk primarily about a non-existent product named reality cleaning laundry detergent for an additional 30 minutes. He vocalized the inclusion of the hyphen. Requests. Multiple cases of reality cleaning laundry detergent. Multiple researchers have suggested that SCP-507 should go through cognitohazard training to prevent further damage to its mental state. The proposal is pending O5 approval. Next, he arrived in a populated area, experiencing what he perceived as, at least, a magnitude 7 earthquake. Despite this, he noted a distinct lack of infrastructure damage. Local inhabitants expressed confusion upon his attempts to question them about the unusual amount of tectonic activity. After 30 minutes, 507 was approached by law enforcement and detained under suspicion of public intoxication due to its inability to stand or walk normally. At the police station, he learned that the current level of tectonic activity was considered normal in this universe. Almost all architecture was designed to incorporate a complex series of gyroscopes and gimbals that offset the constant motion it was subjected to. 507 was released after passing a breathalyzer test. Unable to contact a local Foundation equivalent, and lacking sufficient funds for better accommodations, he eventually settled in a homeless encampment located in the city's Central Park, where he adjusted to the constant motion over several days. On day 47 of his shift, Subject was awoken in the middle of the night. Although at first unable to identify what had awakened him, besides a feeling of dizziness and nausea, he quickly discovered that the shaking he had become accustomed to had entirely ceased. He was then further lucid by the sound of screaming, sirens, and distant rumbling crashes and explosions. Upon exiting his tent, he discovered that the area had been impacted by a magnitude earth still, which had leveled much of the city. With no counterbalancing tectonic activity, the massive gimbals integral to the city had ripped themselves from their foundations and destroyed the buildings they supported, crushing or trapping thousands of civilians under the rubble. He spent the remaining 9 days as part of a volunteer disaster response effort, attempting to extricate survivors from the ruins. Now he arrived in a populated area in the Midwestern United States, where Christmas decorations were put up on houses and buildings, despite the date being in early September. Upon further investigation, he learned that the most widely celebrated religious winter holidays were celebrated throughout the entire year in this reality. Throughout their stay, he saw mostly Christmas festivities and celebrations, likely due to the religious demographics of its location. He noted that this change had minimal impact on everyday life for most, but it did have some cultural impacts, such as all music being holiday-themed. Most popular songs were Christmas-oriented, and people using holiday-skewed variations of common phrases such as, "We'll wrap that gift when we get to it," and "You can give a reindeer a red nose, but you can't make it glow." Starting in December, he noted that people were preparing for the winter holidays by taking down and ceasing all holiday-oriented decorations and festivities. He noted that during this time, radios stopped playing holiday-oriented music and instead played music similar to what would normally be heard on the radio in baseline reality, which most people seem to have a strong distaste for. Approximately 3 months into its stay, he noticed that it was being followed by 2 men. He claims that one looked similar to an agent he saw before, a plainclothes agent who had previously helped retrieve him during the events of Entry Redacted. After being followed for 10 minutes, a red and green van with the markings "Snow Cookies Presents" pulled up next to him. He shifted after multiple armored men with weapons stepped out of the van and approached him. Requests for all winter holiday-oriented decorations set up around the facility to be taken down as he shifted back in December. Denied.